Yo, yo, what's up, everybody? It's Shy Seedling back again with another video. This one is the very first of its kind. This one will be a struggle with me. Yay! This one is a cross between the art process videos that I made and the draw with me video that I made. Draw with me will be more of like a kind of train of thought. We'll talk about random stuff and we'll just draw together. The art process will be like way more technical and Clip Studio Paint focused, or whatever it is that I'm using, focused, I guess. And then the this one will be focusing on learning. It'll be centered around a study that I'm doing on whatever reference, whatever I decide that I want to practice on. And the goal is to just kind of share that learning process and share bad art with you all, because I feel like when I'm watching artists on YouTube, I'm kind of not really like professional and I don't really have a whole lot of technical skill. I just kind of like draw for fun, right? So I wanted this video to be, I feel like it'll be a lot more vulnerable and more relatable as a kind of, I'm not a green artist by any means because I've been drawing my whole life and I'm 28, but more like learning, like learning from the ground up almost, certain concepts. So this one in particular is going to be a single layer challenge type thing. I was watching Mark Bruett. I'm probably butchering his name. I'll put his little like channel screenshot up. He has a school on YouTube called YouTube Art School. He's really funny. He's been on YouTube for a really long time. He's very popular. I'm sure that if you're an artist and you like watching art videos, you've seen him around. I was watching one of his older videos and he was talking about single layer painting and what it meant to him, what he learned, all that stuff. And I find I kind of like resonated with that, and I think that I really need to just be uncomfortable with learning more things. And being uncomfortable has proven to yield results because I'm constantly doing something new and taking what I learned from that and applying it to a different concept. So this one's going to be a single layer. I'm only going to paint on one layer, and I don't typically paint either. So this was like a double whammy study. So if you want to struggle with me, this is kind of, again, like a draw with me. So you grab your sketchbook, grab your tablet, whatever it is that you draw on, pick a study, pick something that you want to study, or here's the picture of what I was studying. You can, do this one if you want. And I'll just talk about, how I was feeling, what I was doing, what I was focusing on, what I learned, what I didn't learn, all that stuff. In the beginning of this video, you will see that I did not actually use a screen recording for the first little bit. So it's going to be a Clip Studio speed paint, and then afterwards it'll be screen recording strictly. So you'll see my Clip Studio workspace, and I'll talk about, if I need to, if I feel the need to talk about Clip Studio, then I will do that. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Jump into the trenches, get all muddy. We're struggling. Let's go. All right, so we're hitting the ground running here. So the beginning of this was so difficult. I felt so uncomfortable. I've done a couple of painting single layer studies before, I think like 1 or 2 in the past, just to practice like painting portraits in general. And it's always so uncomfortable in the very beginning because I'm just not used to doing it. I don't do it often, and I'm just not used to doing it in general. So in the beginning, it's so ugly. It's so bad. I'm trying to like figure out what colors I need to use. First of all, I wasn't color picking. I had the reference on a separate screen, either my phone, or if I was working near my computer, it was on my computer. And all I did was pretty much like stare at it and borderline not really even look away from my tablet, and just kind of like draw like that, because I want to get better at color picking with my eyes and not just taking it from a reference. And I just felt so uncomfortable because I didn't have lines to go off of. I was making my lines and filling in the values all at once, and I didn't like that. So there was a lot of times for the first up until like the second time I started over, a little after that, when I finally started to like put down details in the face and it looked kind of alright-ish to me, did I stop feeling uncomfortable. I felt uncomfortable the entire time, and then whenever I got to a point where I was confused, or it just wasn't really working out, or I just kept looking at my painting and then the reference, and I was just getting bogged down, and I wanted to quit so many times. But in the beginning, it was like every brushstroke I felt like I wanted to run away. Anatomy is really hard. We all know that. Perspective is really hard. We all know that. It's not something that I study too terribly often. I just need to study more things in general. So the perspective and the anatomy really wasn't giving until probably like the last 25% of the drawing. I'm not even gonna lie to you. It was a struggle the whole time. But I really wanted to focus on looking past the icky, looking past the I don't really like this, I know this looks like shit phase. So I just kept plugging along. I kept trying things. If I needed to erase something, I just erased the whole thing. I was like, you know what, if it's not looking right, it's best to just color over it with the base color and start again. And I did that multiple times, and as I continued the painting process, as I continued to learn, I found that was a lot easier to do, and I was able to commit more. That was another thing that Mark Bruet was talking about, was when you're painting on a canvas on a single layer and you're not allowing yourself to have that security of multiple layers, you have to commit to an idea. You have to commit to what you put down and try to work with what you have. And he was talking about how valuable a skill that is as an artist, and I do agree. Like, especially for the lips, when I had the lips where I wanted them, I didn't want them to be moved, I didn't want them to be touched, but the reference called for the light shining over her face and her lips, and I saved that part for last because it was really like freaking me out. I didn't want, because the lips are kind of like a focal point compositionally, and I didn't want to mess that up. But as I was going through and doing the arms and the neck and just going back over the same things over and over again, trying different things, I realized that, this study isn't perfect. This isn't something that's going to be polished. This isn't something that I'm going to post and be like, hey, look at me, it's all flashy and amazing and cool. This is for learning specifically. And this goes back to what I was saying in the previous video. Who am I drawing this for? I'm drawing this for me, and I'm drawing this for you guys. I'm drawing this to be as vulnerable as I can and show that, even though I can draw, right, there is so much time spent learning, and it's okay to make a drawing that isn't polished, that isn't all the way finished, but served a purpose, and you learn something. You can take something from that and translate it to something else later on for a finished product, if that's what you're going for, a commission, whatever the case may be. I was really drawing this for us. So I try to keep that in mind. I was like, this is for us. I'm going to try to continue to push through. I'm not going to worry about if it's perfect. I'm not going to worry about whether or not it's finished. And I'm just going to go until I feel like it looks at least decent enough and I feel like I've learned something. So that's what I kept doing. I've been talking for about 6 minutes now, and we're not even close to being done. I think this video is going to be about 30 minutes or so. So strap in, guys. I'll leave y'all alone for a minute. You can watch me kind of figure this out, and then I'll come back in a bit and talk more about like what's going on in the background clip studio wise and what I'm doing, what my plan of attack is, all that stuff. To get a little technical, I guess, here, another thing that I used a lot was the lasso tool. And watching this back now, it's really satisfying. Watching myself erase and repaint, use the lasso tool to rope off a section and feel confident that, you know, I'm not going to mess up the other parts of the drawing because I've sectioned it off. And I was intentional about where I was putting the lasso sections at. When I'm doing like line art and flats and stuff, it's very like clear where the lasso tool's going. But for painting, you kind of have to think a little bit more 3D and plan ahead, kind of, because the lasso tool can help you distinguish between shapes, but it can also kind of make it harder for you if you're not thinking so far ahead. So initially I was trying to block out the shapes and the arms without the lasso tool, and it was just getting really muddy. And I realized that there was some values in between at the edges of each cylinder is what I would call it. I kind of just started breaking them down into shapes and not really worrying about the form, but just worrying about distinguishing the shapes from one another. And using the lasso tool, it was so helpful. And I just kept going over and over and over the same spots and lassoing and selecting and all that stuff. And having the second window and moving it over to the side was really helpful too at looking at the big picture. I always do that, but I feel like for paintings it's very necessary because I get caught up in details and I can just sit there and erase and redraw forever. This is a painting, right? And typically paintings are viewed from a farther distance, and I feel like you don't need a whole lot of information to portray a texture or to portray form or shapes in a painting. So I tried not to focus too much on polishing and making everything crispy, because from far away it was looking just fine. So I used that to kind of zoom out and recenter myself, and you'll eventually see me bring in a second layer, and that's for the overlay. I realized that I couldn't make the green as bright as I wanted it to be without changing like tonally the entire piece. So I kind of cheated a bit, but I ended up just re-emerging the layers later on. And I think that as I'm just sitting here watching myself kind of like paint over everything, I really was just floundering for some of it. For a lot of it, I was floundering. I was starting to become more confident in some areas, and then I'd color something in, get kind of like caught up in coloring that or shading that or whatever I was doing, and then zoom back out and look at it, and I'm like, oh man, I've gotten farther away from what it is that I set out to do, and it doesn't look as much like the reference as I wanted it to. So I'd have to recenter and redraw. And it was just a rinse and repeat process. But it was going through and doing this, I think, was very eye-opening in general. My mind is drawing a blank. I'm just sitting here staring at it. I don't really know what else to say about that, so I guess I'll just come back later. Womp womp. So, as I'm sitting here watching the speed paint, trying to find things to talk about, I'm realizing that it's probably just better to go over loosely what I'm talking about, and then if anyone wants like specific information, I feel like I'll probably just make a video anyway of like exactly what my process is on Clipsio Paint with like a slowed down screen recording, screenshots, and all that stuff. I don't know when that'll be up, but I think that's what I'll do. That way I don't have to stare at my screen that's going 90 miles a minute trying to catch what it is that I'm doing. But I wanted to talk about now feeling confident in moving forward. When I was working on the face, the second time and I started working on the neck, I really started to gain some momentum. I had a color palette that was full of different types of blues. I knew what values I needed, and it's funny because I picked like the worst reference to do this on, but I was like, you know what, full send, balls to the walls, we're just gonna do it. Fuck it, we're going live type thing. So I have a color palette. It's all blue, as you can see on my workspace, and I'm just painting, going over, and I became more and more confident in just erasing things. Like I became more confident in just trying the idea again and painting over stuff, and I began to feel a little bit freer and less stiff, and it kind of shows in my lines overall. Like eventually they get a lot more certain and less stiff in general. I really wanted to portray, I think the focus for me was to portray the values first and foremost. I wanted to make sure that like you could tell that she was kind of like leaning up, you know, with her neck in shadow and her arms, you know, completely awash with light. And at first, when I was going through, I initially had her all blue, I think, and then I decided that putting the green in was a little bit more arduous because the green is light. I decided to work backwards, so I made her limbs green and her body green, and then put blue on top of that, and just continued to draw and redraw and erase and smudge. And I was really using a lot of the art tools more often than I usually would. I was bouncing between the smudge tool, the smooth round brush. I think I used the watercolor brush a little bit, and the neck in particular was the most satisfying for me because it really does look like it's kind of glowing. And then when I make the green brighter, it really does kind of come together eventually. But that's simply because at the end of the day, I became more confident in what I was doing, what I was using, and I was okay with getting rid of things that didn't make sense or that I didn't like. It was a really eye-opening process. I think this time I was trying to be more mindful in general about, you know, what I was studying, what I was looking at. And I feel like this one, out of all the other ones, I was the most successful in learning something this time, which is super exciting. Sidebar, for anyone who cares about Monster Hunter at all. I've already mentioned this in one of my previous videos, but I have played Monster Hunter for like more than half my life, and Wilds is going to be coming out soon, and the beta I think is coming out next week, and then I think there's a second beta, and then the game's out, something like that, and they released another trailer. There is Narcilla in the game. Oh my goodness, when they released and announced that they were like, oh, we're gonna bring Gypsyros in, or Gypsyros, or however you want to say it, I was like, bruh, I don't want that. I hate Gypsyros. And I was like, they better bring Narcilla in, because I can't. Ecology-wise, she eats Gypsyros. So I was like, she has to be in there, right? And they released a trailer, and she's in there, and I was screaming. I'm so excited. The little flying centipede thing looks super cool. It's kind of giving Giganox a little bit. That would be cool if they brought in Kazoo or Giganox. I'd be so down for that, because it looks like there's some caves in there. There's a lot of caves, actually, it looks like, in Wilds. I really hope, because they released, you know, that they have an ice area. I really hope that they release water, dude. Oh my goodness. If anyone's played Monster Hunter 3U on the DS, they had water, and you could swim and fight Lagiacrus, Gobul, I think Ludroth was introduced in that game. You could fight all of them in the water. All of them. And I want more. And everyone's like, water, I didn't like it, blah, blah, blah. But I'm feeling it in my bones. I'm feeling it in my bones. And if they brought in Narcilla, and they have, like, Yankutku, you know what I mean? I don't know. And then they have Gore at the end. I don't know. I forgot that they brought in Gore. So we have a bunch of 4U callbacks in general, because Valhabar all day, every day. So I'm like, 3U? 3U? Okay, I'm sorry. That was that was a random rant. Yeah, anyone in the comments who cares about Monster Hunter, talk with me. Tell me how you feel, because I'm stoked. I'm so excited. So right about here is where I'm freaking out a little bit about the lips. It was the last part. It was the last thing that I really needed to do, and I was avoiding it. I was doing everything else, and I was avoiding the lips, because I knew that, like, staring at the reference, I could see what was happening, but I couldn't understand it enough to translate it onto my paper. There were, like, so many values going on between the light, the lips, the reflections. There were at least like 4 or 5 values on her lips alone, and I was like, dude, I'm so bogged down. Like, I don't want to mess this up, and I don't want to lose her lip shape in this neon green color. And you can kind of see here towards the end that the lips are looking like really confusing, really rough. From far away, it actually doesn't look too terribly bad, but it wasn't looking like the reference. And I was getting in my head again about trying to have it be polished and make sense and look good, and I had to, like, check myself and be like, no, just commit to the idea. Commit to what you're doing. It doesn't matter if it looks exactly like the reference. You're learning. So just observe as much as you can, learn as much as you can, and that's all you can do. So after I recentered myself towards the very, very end of this illustration, I kind of just either left it the way that it looks now, or I kind of like flushed it out a little bit and discovered the extra values that I was kind of missing with my eye. I really liked the ear to the chin to the neck thing that was going on, and from far away everything else looks okay. Up close I feel like it just looks really rough, but again, that's kind of like the point. Or not the point, but like, no one's judging you because your painting looks like doo-doo from, like, you know, right in front of your face. They're typically looking at it from far away. If you wanted to, then you could, but that's not really the intent, and that's not really where you get the texture in painting from, and I really want to capture that. So I was trying to not be too perfect. And at the end, I think, you know, it was good enough to be shared, to be used for this video, and I learned a lot of stuff. So that's really all that matters. So, we're at the end now. You saw what the reference looked like. It was up on the screen for a good like 5 seconds. And you saw what my finished product looked like right after that. And here we are. Is it perfect? No. Is it kind of ugly? Yes. Does it look like the reference? Sort of. Did I learn something? Absolutely. I learned so much from doing this. I think the painting itself took about 6 hours or something altogether is what CSP was telling me. And I do not regret showing this to you. I do not regret talking about it. And it feels weird sharing something that I don't like or that I don't think looks good or anything like that. But I think in this sense, in this context, it's invaluable for me to share my experience with learning and showing you something that I don't think looks great. And I think I've repeated this a bunch of times throughout the video. The whole point of me showing this to you, especially with the reference and my work side by side, and you can obviously tell that they're like, it doesn't look that great, is for the sole purpose of relating to anyone who's just learning and feels like their art, you know, is kind of falling short from what they think it should look like or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter at the end of the day, because when you're going to get into doing that you're working on, that you actually want to show to the world, you have all of this information that you learned from these ugly studies that you can take and apply in your work that you're working on currently. And you can feel that much more proud, because before, if you didn't do this study, it might not look the same, you know? I don't know. You guys can let me know down in the comments if any of this was helpful, if you enjoyed this at all. I honestly really like doing this, and I think that I'll continue to do this. And in terms of like how long or short it can be, that can be something that we can all kind of discuss and talk about. But I think that this is really important, really valuable information. So if you liked the video, that's lovely. Please leave a like. If you didn't like it, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Subscribe to the channel if you want to. I think we're at 25 now, which is insane. Halfway to 100, or no, what? I was a psych major. Don't judge me. Halfway to 50. That's so cool, and I haven't even been on the platform for an entire month. So thank you guys all so much for engaging, for watching, for supporting. Once I think probably I get a little bit higher up in number, I'll start posting in the community tab and see if anyone has any feedback for me that they can post there that I can see directly, instead of worrying about posting in the comments. And I believe that is all that I wanted to say here. The trenches was real muddy today, y'all. And for these struggle with me's, it will always be muddy. They're shooting at us. There's barbed wire. The whole thing. The whole 9 yards. But you know what? We made out of that trench alive. We live to see another day. And I will see you guys in another trench later on. Or something. I don't even know what I just said. See y'all. Bye.